All right. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever time you might be viewing this video. Welcome back to Deep Dive here at Central Oregon Recording. We are getting started today with equalization. It is one of the great and many tools that we get to use when we are working on mixing. And I figured today we would kind of go over basics of EQing specific instruments and maybe getting into some more advanced techniques on how to use EQ, things you can do with it, and ways you might not have thought to use it in the past. So anyway, let's start diving in here and looking at a mix. This is a mix that we have looked at before. But we'll kind of jump in here. So I've taken pretty much all the EQs off here. I have left some of the compression stuff on just to kind of, hone some stuff in, but it's nothing crazy. And we can look at the EQs I was using, and I kind of go through and talk about them, and we can throw on some new EQs and jump through that too. But anyway, let's just jump into the song here and give it a full listen. Okay, so we get the idea of the song. We kind of know what it sounds like. There are definitely some things we can start kind of cleaning. Now, remember that this is all variable based on what you hear and what you think. That's kind of the beauty of doing mixes like this is it's all based on what you want it to sound like. But there's some things I want to clean up. I want to clean up some of the kick. Probably try and do some things if we can bring out some more punch in the toms, which we don't even have tom channels on this track. And we can bring out some sparkle in the guitars, etc. But again, it's always nice to have an idea of what you want to accomplish. And this really falls back on using your ear. There are a lot of great plugins out there for EQ, and a lot of them have a very beautiful, UI. So it's usually like a GUI, a GUI, a graphic user interface. So something we can visually see, so we can see what's happening in the sound, and we have like a spectrograph of some kind, which is great. However, this was a downfall when I first started. Of basically, I would EQ with my eyes. I would look at it and say, wow, that looks like too much. I shouldn't be having to do that much. And with a really well-recorded track, maybe not, but maybe so. It all is variable. It really comes down to what sounds good. So I will always caution everyone to try not to use your eyes when you're doing any kind of EQ moves. All right, so let's just take a look in here. And honestly, I'm going to start with the guitars here. So let's solo this side up first. Okay, so those don't sound too bad, actually. Those are pretty good. But I think we can do a little bit more with them. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. First thing I'm going to do is we're just going to take these out of group mode, and that way we can listen to one at a time. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. Let's listen to the other one. Okay, you can hear that they are two different tones, which is why we had two microphones on the guitar. For this, I believe we did like one on the body and one on the neck, so you can kind of hear like the warmth off of one of these mics. We'll kind of get a little closer here. Compared to this one. So that mic sounds a little bit boxy, and that's something that we can actually go ahead and clean up. So first, I want to see what we did. So here's the EQ that I had on here. And it looks like all I really did was roll off some low end and boost some top end. So definitely interesting, but let's go ahead. I'm just going to grab another EQ, and we're going to grab the infinity so we can really see what's going on here. All right, here it is. Okay, again, this is where it gets interesting. So again, this, we can actually see what's happening here, which can be nice, but at the same time, don't be afraid of doing some crazy EQ stuff to get the sound you're looking for. But we can see there's a huge buildup here at the low end from this guitar, right? This we don't need. This is taking up energy that just doesn't need to exist, which is why we did the roll off. So it's the first thing I'm going to add in, and we're going to roll a bunch of that off. We just don't need all that down there. So from there, if I do this, we can kind of solo this up and listen to this here. This, you can kind of see this right in this range here. That's where all of that boxiness is coming in. So it's all that kind of low mud nastiness. So let's kind of sweep around here. Okay, now keep in mind with these guitars were not meant to be big, luscious, beautiful acoustic guitars in the song. They're serving a purpose of rhythm, honestly, in this song. So understanding what your instrument or what your sound source is in the song, like what it's providing to the song, can also help you try to figure out how you want to EQ it in a specific way. So for this one, again, we have the nice, beautiful lows in the other mic. So I'm not too worried about them in this microphone. So in this one, I kind of want to bring out more of the attack, and because I want the guitars, the acoustics, to be a percussive instrument in here. So let's go find some attack. Okay, so right there, that sounds pretty good. Let's kind of bring some of that up. And of course, last, we can probably bring up some highs as well. So we'll just kind of scoop this up. So there, we're bringing out the percussiveness. We're cutting a little bit of the boxy tone out of there. We're rolling off some low end to get some of that, rid of that nasty low end buildup that we just don't need on that acoustic guitar. So again, I'm not really focused on specific frequencies when I do things like this. Yes, there are definitely frequencies that are your quote go-tos that you probably want to search around. But again, there's nothing saying that you have to choose a certain frequency on this instrument and take it out by this much dB, etc., to make it sound good, because it all depends on the instrument, depends on the player, depends on what microphones were used, on the room, how it was recorded, if there was EQ or not going in, compression, etc. There's so many factors that it's really difficult to just kind of say this is an overall works for any of XYZ instrument. And if we go ahead and we look in here, so in here, we can open this up, we can see that there are tons of different presets we can use. So like, for example, acoustic guitar. So here, this is what they have in here as an acoustic guitar preset. So you see rolling off, boosted some low end, they boosted some of that in there, they cut some here, boosted some top, and then they cut again. So like, let's see what this sounds like. Again, it's not the greatest for this guitar. And it's not to say that this preset isn't a good preset. It just might not be the best preset for that guitar or for that instrument. So I always suggest that you definitely, like that, use your ears and set your EQs to kind of do what you want them to do. So again, this is what it's all about, right? We're engineers. We're here to create sound, to make things sound better. So we really need to focus in on finding the things that we don't like and cutting them out and adding the stuff that we do. That's the whole point of this. Again, I'm just kind of I'm duplicating what I had already done here, but you kind of get the idea. Again, just bringing out some top end. Now, when we blend that with the other mic, let's see what that does. You can see it fattens up a little bit more. You get a little bit more top end. Things just sound a little more cleaner and tighter on the guitar instead of a little muddy. So I'll do it again here. So we'll have it on. Take it out. Put it back in. And again, we just EQ'd one mic on this. Now let's say, maybe you only have one mic. You of course can then just do this on one mic. But this is a great idea of what you can do. So let's go ahead. We'll do it again on the other side. And let's look at this other mic here. So same thing. It's tons of low end buildup down here. We just don't need that. So if you want, you can always go look. There's plenty of things online. But finding some kind of like piano roll or something that shows you where the fundamentals are of instruments can be very, very helpful, because it helps you understand where specific instruments really sit in the frequency spectrum, which gives you a great idea and a great kind of guideline of what information do you really need, what information doesn't matter. So that way you can kind of start to understand where you can kind of cut and boost certain things. Now, there's always that idea that maybe, or that thought process of, one cut is worth 1,000 boosts, etc., etc. I always look at it this way. If it starts to sound bad. If you find a frequency that you've boosted and you're sweeping and it just doesn't sound good, you're like, man, that just makes it sound way worse. Like it sticks out, it's pointy, it pokes, maybe it's like a harmonic or a frequency that's very prominent. You're like, man, that's just too much of that. That's where I typically like to cut. I like to pull it out just to take a little bit of it away. Everything else around it, it's more of, where I want to accentuate things, whether I want to add a little bit of extra lows, maybe make it a little more warm or thick sounding, or maybe I want to accentuate the highs or the mid-range somewhere, maybe add some point or add some air. And typically I like to go a little bit wider if I'm boosting and a little bit more shallow, or bring in the Q when I'm cutting. So basically what I mean, the Q control is this right here, that super wide or super narrow. So you can see the smaller the number, the tighter it is, then the bigger the number, the wider it is. So this is what I typically like to mess with when I'm working with stuff. So again, like wider if I'm boosting, tighter if I'm cutting. And even if we pull in a stock EQ, this will do the same thing. So if we have this mid, so this yellow right here, go ahead and gain it up, and I'll scoot it over a little bit so we can really see it. So you can see here, as the numbers get smaller, or actually this is backwards, when the numbers get bigger, it gets tighter, the numbers get smaller, it gets larger. So most of the time it is good to know the type of EQ. Again, like new digital EQs, something like this, like Infinity, most likely will have it this way, where smaller the number, tighter, wider if it's a larger number. If it's more analog, it might be this way. And yes, this is where visual comes into play, because you can actually see if you're going wide or if you're going tight. But a lot of other EQs, we'll pull in another EQ. Let's go ahead and find here an SSL. And this, maybe they have actual pictures on them to show you what's happening in the cue, or maybe you just don't know. They just show you bell, they show you shelf, they show you, a cut of some kind. So you have to just kind of understand like a little bit about the symbols and what they do. All right, let's take some of these off because we just don't need them. All right. So the basic ones that we typically deal with are some kind of a band pass or a cut, or something like this. So you can put them on either side. So there are different names for these, but in general, if it's up here, you are cutting the highs, so a high cut, because as you move it, you're starting to take away high-end frequencies, high-end information. This can also be considered a low pass, because you're letting the low-end information pass through, right? It's kind of standard, but if you didn't know, that's what that is. Again, on the opposite end, we have a low cut, because we're cutting the lows, or a high pass, because we're letting the highs pass through. So those are the kind of the standard names for that style of EQ, or that band. Then of course here, this would be called a bell, because if we boost it up, and we can kind of basically, like, it looks like this, looks like a bell. So this is a bell curve. Some EQs are actually designed, I believe API will do this, that if you are boosting or cutting, it will change the size or the Q automatically. So as you're cutting, maybe it's getting tighter. As you're boosting, maybe it gets wider. But this is built into the actual software or hardware of the EQ itself to do specific things. But this is a bell. And then the last one that we typically see is a shelf. And there can be a high shelf or a low shelf. And this is the opposite, where we're boosting maybe just the highs, or maybe we're boosting just the lows. So those are the types of EQ bands that we typically deal with. And some EQs maybe have like a limited number. On something like this, we can go through, we could actually add as many as we so want to do kind of whatever. not that I would ever do something like that. It's a little crazy, but you get the idea where we could go in and really start to notch out. While this can be great, you can definitely get carried away searching, trying to clean up or fix things that aren't really issues. And that's something to really, really be aware of, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because in the end, it really matters on what it sounds like as a whole, right? With everything going. So when doing EQ, be careful keeping yourself soloed into an instrument for too long and making that one instrument sound perfect. Because again, it really depends on how it plays with the other instruments. So we got these sounding pretty good, I think. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. So of course we can solo it up with the other guitar. Again, this one sounds a little different. So let's go ahead and look at this real quick. So again, you can see cut the low end, boost a little bit of top end. Let's see what we did on the other microphone. All top end on that one. Okay, 1 second here. Let me switch this over. All right. But there, you can really hear how percussive those are, and that's what they're designed to be. They're designed to be a percussive instrument in this specific song. They are not meant to be this beautiful, warm, rich acoustic guitar, because it's not that kind of song. So, go ahead, unsolo these. That. They're just meant there to be there, tucked in, adding some kind of rhythmic element to kind of keep the song moving along as if they were hi-hats or a shaker or a tambourine, etc., etc. Okay, let's go ahead and start taking a look here at our drums. Jump in here when they come in. Okay, so let's get rid of the shaker, tambourine. Let's look at our overheads first. So something to notice, this is in drummer's perspective. In other words, the hi-hat overhead is panned to the left side. The overhead ride is panned to the right side, as if you were sitting behind the drum kit, where your hi-hat would be on your left side and your toms would come around, floor tom on your right side with the ride. That's how this is panned right now. Now, this definitely sounds very boxy and very roomy. So let's take a look and see what I happen to do on here. So here, you can see I actually boosted up a little bit of the lows. So on a shelf, trying to bring some of that back. Cut here around the kind of boxy mid-range, usually around 400 or 500-ish on drums. That's where you typically find some of that ugliness. I took out some point, but then brought up some air. So let's see what this does. You can see it started to bring out more of the attack on the toms. We got rid of some of the boxiness. And again, I didn't really, I boosted some top end, but I didn't really boost anything in the middle. Like if we go ahead and take this out, let me go ahead and do this for both of them here so we can see them. We have left and right respectively. We'll take the top end out. even with the top end gone on there, it actually sounds pretty darn good, because all we did is we took out the nasty information. We didn't need to accentuate some of the other stuff because it already existed there. We just needed to get the ugly information out of the way to let the beauty shine. It's, you know, it's like having a dirty window and you're just starting to basically wipe and clean off the window. And then all of a sudden you can see all the beautifulness and the sunshine outside and the birds are chirping, blah, blah, blah. It's the same kind of idea here, that we just need to basically unmask or open up to show what actually exists. All right, let's keep looking. So I started with the overheads there because, again, typically when I build a mix, I start with the overheads because that's like the overall sound there. I'm gonna throw the compressors back on here. So you can hear there that the compressors are doing quite a bit of almost EQ themselves, where they're adding in so much kind of like snappy attack and punch. And again, they are there for a reason, to kind of help bring out the toms, because we didn't record the toms in there. All right, let's look at our mono overhead sound. Not bad. Let's see what's in here. So looks like I boosted quite a bit of lows, pulled out, again, a lot of that mid, and then boosted some kind of presence in here to kind of add the attack. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, so I'm going to take all of these out for a minute so we can do this. So you really, really heard the difference there. I mean, that's a huge difference in sound. But let's kind of search around and try and see what we can find in there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to boost up by a little bit. So 7 dB, nothing crazy, you know. I'd say never, I never really go past like 10 or 12, just it becomes a little too much. So somewhere right in here, because I just want to hear and sweep across, right? So a little bit tighter Q, let's sweep. You can kind of hear that kind of honky, nasally, nasty, just weird sound going on in there. That's the stuff that we just don't really want to mess with. We just don't, this just sounds bad. And you can see here in the low mids, that's actually, if I take this out, that's where I cut, right in that range. So just that. Kind of give you that kind of sound. It's just kind of nasty, and we want to get rid of it because we like that. As soon as we take it out, you can hear the attack of everything come out. It's kind of pointy and nice, just to know it's there. Now there, I boosted that low end to bring out more of the tone in the toms and the kick drum. Like that. It's just kind of all attack, and that's really all you hear. So by bringing in that low end, again, I am getting more of the kick, but you can even hear even the snare itself fattens up a little bit. After that, we had this presence boost up here, so let's see what that is. Like that, just adding some attack, and then I don't think I had the air in there. So that's kind of where we're sitting. And then, of course, there's a compressor there to make it sound like this. Okay, so you kind of get the idea there. All right, so let's look at this microphone. And let's go ahead, I'm going to jump into the chorus for this. Okay, so this is our crotch mic, and if you haven't checked out our video on how to do the worst mic, this is exactly what this is. Crotch mic, worst mic, dick mic, whatever name you want to kind of attach to it. But the idea is that it sits over the kick drum, pointed at the snare between the toms towards the drummer or the drummer's crotch or whatever, just that way. So, because that's typically where the snare sits. They, on a drum set, you typically straddle the snare drum when you're playing. So we're kind of pointed in between the toms over the kick at the snare drum, and it gets us an overall sound. Like if you have one mic and only one mic to record drums, you could use this and EQ it, or maybe make duplicates and EQ each one separately to get the sound you're looking for. But let's take a look and see what's going on. So here, looks like I did something similar like I did on the other overhead, boosted some lows and cut some low mids to get rid of the boxiness. So let's see. Again, getting rid of that honk, that kong kind of sound. It's just that kong is the nasty, the that's what we want to get rid of. So okay. Of course, if we put that with, oops, not that one, with our overheads. Here it kind of cleans it up a little bit. Okay, let's go look at our snare drum. Okay, fat sounding snare, but let's take a look at what we did. So this looks a little crazy, right? We've cut lows, we've boosted a little bit of like low mids, we've cut a ton here out of this and then brought some top in. So let's see what it sounds like. It's quite a big difference. But again, I mean, we're cutting 10 dB. And again, this was not like I looked and said, oh man, I'm cutting 10 dB of gain and I'm boosting 6 here. I didn't care. I turned the knobs till I got what I'm looking for. Now, granted, we have a sample that goes along with this. So you can hear the sample has the air and the attack, so we blend the two together. Again, just trying to accentuate the bottom punch of that snare drum because we've got that sample in there. Okay, last things to look at is our kick drums. Okay, so you can see this little tiny notch right here in the red, 80 hertz. This is literally to bring out the kind of fundamental that's happening in the kick drum, like where I want it to sit. Then, of course, we have the big scoop to get rid of any funky boxiness and then honkiness, and then a huge boost up here on the top end to bring out some more of the attack. Now, of course, we have a sample with this too. Here's the sample. So very roomy sample, very boxy sample. So what I did, roughly same thing, boosting around the fundamental, cutting out the low mids, the boxiness, and then boosting some top end to get this. Put them together. Okay, so you get the idea. Last thing, Tambourine Shaker. I believe both of these are just basically rolling off low end because of the type of instruments that they are. Bring these in. There's nothing else down there. It's just top end up there, so we really don't care about any of that. But we end up with this. Like that, you can hear like that calm, that ha, that sound is all gone. It's pulled out. We've got a nice punch to the kick. We can hear the toms. We can hear the snare. Everything's sounding great and punchy and big. Yes, there's some compression there, but most of that was done with EQ. Just getting rid of the nasty, the stuff that we don't like, and bringing out and accentuating the pretty stuff and the punchy stuff, the things that we want to hear. And that's basically what you go through and do. You make a band, you can kind of basically swirl it around, figure out, okay, there's nasty, pull it, make another one, and then sweep it around, like, okay, there's the pretty, let's make it wide and kind of bring it out, and just use your ears. That's the biggest thing with this, is making sure you're using your ears to do this stuff, because your ears are king. That's, you know what sounds good. And if you're unsure, or if you're not confident in your EQ abilities, go listen to music you enjoy. Go listen to drum sounds you like, bass, guitar, vocals, whatever it happens to be, and really focus and listen to it. While it won't sound exactly the same on your specific mix or song, etc., you can get close. You can start to listen to the bass and say, okay, is the bass guitar, does it have more attack to it? Is it more clarity or brighter than mine? Is it more punchy, more low end? Are the mids different? Like, is it boxy sounding compared to mine, or is it not boxy? Are the drums very like bright, or are they darker? And you can just listen for generalizations and use that on your quote reference tracks or songs that you enjoy listening to kind of start to learn what you're doing. Because if you can hear it, if you make a move and you hear the difference, you've now started to basically understand and put that in your head of like, if I do this, this is what happens. It's a cause and effect. And by putting that in your brain multiple times over and over and over, you start to learn kind of like your go-tos of like, I really enjoy doing this, and this with my music that I record. Or maybe you're working on someone else's music, and let's say you have a whole album to do. You can actually sit down and go, okay, I figured this out for the first song. I'm going to save these as presets, and then I can open them up on the next song and hopefully be like 80 or 90% there and really start messing more with effects and automation and levels, etc., etc. Okay, so let's keep going. Since we have more to look at, let's look at bass. Okay, so let's get rid of this guy for now. So we have the bass DI and a bass cabinet. So here's the bass DI. Here's the cab. You can see they're very similar, but let's see what we did. So you can see here, this is just a generalization on the bass for the DI. So you can see that here I cut around 180 hertz and then around 3K. And you're probably wondering, like, wait a minute, it's bass. Why have you taken out so much low end? Well, if we look at the other bass here, you can see I did almost the opposite. I cut all the high end at 180 and then I cut at 60. Now, why did I do this? This allows me to have a blend between the two of just my low end and then more of the presence and kind of mid-bite range that I'm looking for. So here's just this guy right here. Let's get rid of this. Here's just the low end. Turn this up. Just kind of woolly, fat sounding. And now let's look at the other one. Again, just all that attack and mid-range, etc. But when you put them together, excuse me, you can get a blend of both. And that's the great thing, is now you have the ability to blend between just your low end and just your top end. So you can have presence, you can have low end, you can have different blends for different parts of the song. And you don't have to record a cabinet to do this. You can also do this just having a DI and duplicating and doing the same exact thing. And then, of course, the last thing I have in here, if I put this back on, is just our crazy Sans amp, gritty. And that's really just there. And again, look at it, it's the same EQ as the DI. It is there to just add some grit and stuff when we're in the chorus parts. Okay, so we've looked at drums, and again, using your ears, just kind of, you know, take out the nasty, accentuate the pretty. Same thing kind of here is we basically split it up. Bass, typically you don't have to do too much. Maybe you need to go in and start cleaning things up. Luckily for us, the bass player on this song was rock solid and already had like everything sounding the way we needed it to. We've looked at our acoustics. Now let's jump back to a verse and let's start looking at the electric guitars. So first, guitars. Those come in right here. Okay, so two different parts, and we can kind of hear what's going on here, but here is a pretty one. So it's just an arpeggio back and forth. So here's the EQ I did. We again pulled out some low end. There might be, could have been, maybe is, whatever, low end information there that we just don't need. What lives down there? Our bass, our kick drum, things that are of bass nature, not an electric guitar. We don't really need that, especially on this specific guitar, because it's on the upper frets. It's just doing this bright kind of, you know, clean picking arpeggio kind of thing. Pulled out a tiny bit of low mids, just a little bit there. Seems like there might have been a buildup of something. Added some presence up here and then rolled off the top end because I just didn't want the air up there. Very, very subtle, very slight shift, but you can kind of hear the upper mids kind of poke a little bit more. It just gets a little bit more present, but not too much. Very, very, very subtle on this, because when we recorded the guitar part for this, I recorded it exactly the way I wanted to hear it, or pretty darn close, as you can see by the EQ. So don't ever feel like you need to go through and EQ everything. Okay, this is light touch here, because again, we got the sound we were looking for when we were recording, and that's a big thing to think about. If you can, try to get the sound right when you're recording. If you do that, you have less work to do when you get to the mixing stage, because you've already got the sound you were searching for. All right, let's look at the other one. On this one, you can see we actually added some low mids and added some highs. So let's hear it without first, and then with. Okay, so this is bringing out more of the pick. You can actually really hear the pick scraping across the strings, the brah. You can hear all that. You can hear the presence of it. You can kind of hear the body of it. And that's all I did, was trying to accentuate that more, so that way when they're together, you get that brah, and then it just holds out like a pad. All right, we've listened to those. Now let's jump forward in the song, and let's go check out our chorus guitars. And we're going to jump here to the end. These are the big guitars. Okay, so first thing, let's look at the two different mics. So we'll pick this guy. I'm going to center this up here. So you can hear two different microphones were used, and it gives us completely different tones. So before I ever touch an EQ, I can actually blend between these to get somewhat closer to the sound I'm looking for. On this, I happen to have a little bit more top end or bitey sound compared to the other one, but let's look at our EQs. So EQ on this guy. Believe it or not, you can see I actually brought even more top end out. Just bringing out that top end to really accentuate that. And now let's look at the other one. This one, I brought out the lows, like the low mids here. But when they're together, just get a little bit more thickness, warmth, and a little bit more bite, because I want them to really, really poke when they kick in. And let's look at the other guitar. Probably did the same thing. So again, same idea there. This one looks like I took a little bit of the top end out because it was already a little bitey, and this one actually boosted the top end on. How interesting. Listen to that. that some top end, cut a little bit in there. So together. Just kind of keeping that warmth in there. And then all together. So you kind of get the idea here. All right. So two last things I guess to look at: solo guitar and organ. We can look at organ first. So the organ is very much a mid-range instrument, so that's kind of what typically likes to poke out, and what we like to accentuate is right there, so we can hear it in and out. And let me find a good spot here on the organ where he gets nice and loud, like right in here. So again, just bringing out that clarity and that poke in that specific instrument to really let it kind of shine through there. All right, and then of course, guitar solo back here. This lovely little solo. All right, sounds great as it is. And it looks like we brought out some top end on that mic and on that mic just to, again, make that kind of poke through a little bit more. So again, at this part of the song, there is so much going on that we need that mid-range to really poke through, because that's where our ears actually sit. We hear mid-range the most. So that's where we hear voice. That's actually where, where we hear all of that. So, and I wanted it to make sure that it poked through even on the smallest of speakers. That way, like on an iPhone or something, that it's really, really cutting, because it's like that is the element that I want everyone to focus on when it comes in. So having that extra mid-range punch kind of push through the rest of the mix really make sure it's there. Okay, so let's look at some fun stuff now, a little more craziness. Now, of course, you heard the delay. I put the delay back here on the solo guitar. We'll bring it in right here. All right, so you hear that. I'm gonna put this in pre real quick. So it's gonna get the delay's gonna get a little loud, but we'll turn it down here in a sec. Let me bring this down. So there's our delay. Now you can see I have an EQ up here before the delay. So what's up with that? So this is a trick that that I learned that I enjoy very much, is EQing before your effect to really kind of hone in on the sound that you're looking for, because whatever effect you have, reverb, delay, etc., it's going to impart its own equalization to the sound. So EQing the sound before it goes in can help you dial in what you're looking for. So let's listen to this with EQ in, and I'll take it out. So like that, you actually hear that the sound, it gets a little more like, upper mid-range. There's not a lot of lows in it when I have the EQ in, and the reason for that is I don't want it to be in the way of the guitar. The guitar already has that sound, and I'm not looking for that. I want it to sound kind of almost telephony or something, to really let it kind of, not get in the way of the guitar, but still be there so we can still hear it. So let me take this out of pre, and then we'll put the guitar back in here. So now we can hear the two together. So hopefully you could hear when the EQ is in there, the delay is still there, but it doesn't feel like it's taking up the same space as the guitar. Like, it's there, but it just kind of sits back a little bit and lets the guitar still sing over top and kind of sits behind. But without that EQ, the delay all of a sudden feels like it's overwhelming the guitar and really taking over, and that's something we don't want. And I've done this actually on a few different parts, even here on our guitar rooms. You can see there's EQ here. So if I bring one of these in, listen to this. You can kind of hear that, and I'll jump back here to the chorus. So should be able to hear that room on the other side. And again, EQ, just taking out some low, taking out some high, so the room sounds a little different. Again, a little bit brighter, just it doesn't get in the way, especially like this, because I've got the reverb pan the complete opposite of the guitar that it's with. So there is another guitar, of course, going, but it adds a little bit of space to make it sound like this. Just adds a nice little room texture in there. So I didn't do it to everything, but you can see that they're in there. And of course, if I take these out, we'll put the originals back in. So again, just with EQ, we went through drums, went through bass, acoustic guitar, we went through our clean guitars, our dirty guitars, our solo, and then our organ. The last thing to really think about, might be something on the main mix, on your submaster, your two bus, etc., whatever you want to call it, or even on the buses themselves. So like if I actually, now I didn't do it with these are not routing folders, but I'm going to close all these up. And of course, if these were routing folders, which I could convert them if I wanted to, I would have the ability to put plugins on here and EQ like all the drums at once, all the bass at once, all the acoustics. So something I will caution about doing things like that. I would never use EQ on a group of instruments like that to clean things up. So I'm talking about taking out ugliness, about kind of getting punch or something that I'm looking for. I would use it for, think sweetening. So broad and subtle. Same thing on the submaster. I would never go crazy and try and pull out a bunch of like ugly, because let's say 400 on drums. We pull out 400 hertz, which is kind of the boxy-ish tone most of the times on drums. But what if the bass has fundamentals there that make the bass sound the way it's supposed to? And we've pulled it out on the submaster on our two bus. We have now killed that in the drums, but we also killed it in the bass where it actually is needed. So I always like to go and clean things up first on individual channels, because I want it to sound that way. And then from there, if I need to sweeten everything, if I had like, okay, I need a little bit more air on all the drums, or I need a little bit more, warm, thick punch or something on the bass, then I can go in on the bus where everything's routed to on that specific instrument and do it there, or then also do it on a two bus. So for example, I'm going to jump back in here and we'll just, again, chorus, and I'm going to we'll grab an EQ here. Sorry if that was loud, but there it is. So like that, I could add in, maybe say I wanted to add some top end or something here, and again, subtle. Like that. It's 2 dB, which is actually quite a bit. Probably take it down like 1.5, somewhere in there. But you heard how much of an impact one EQ can make, because it's over everything. It's over the entire mix. So everything that has any kind of frequency, so like that, drums, cymbals, even the bass guitar might have some stuff sitting up there, the acoustics, the guitars, the Leslie, all of it. I'm EQing everything, and I'm bringing up all that information at once. So again, kind of when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, you can be very subtle. Very subtle movements can make a really, really big change. I hope this was helpful. I hope you kind of got something out of this, and that, any kind of EQ work gets a little bit easier. Again, the main rules that I typically, guidelines I like to follow: cut out low stuff that you don't need, cut out ugly, so boxiness, ugliness, etc., that you don't like or don't want. Boost the pretty stuff, the things that maybe want to poke out. Think about what the element, what the piece that you're working on, the guitars, the drums, whatever, what that element is doing in the song, what it's providing, and accentuates that part. So for example, in this song, it was acoustic guitars. They were meant to be very rhythmic, so adding that so that they poke out as a rhythmic instrument, not as a beautiful, pretty acoustic guitar. Things like that. Think about what you want that element to do in the mix. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's kind of like a basis of EQ. You can go crazy on individual tracks, go subtle on groups of instruments, or like that on your 2-bus, and hopefully that should help you really start cleaning up your mix, bringing out clarity, punch, etc., whatever word you'd like to use on any of that kind of stuff, to really create the sound that you're looking for. All right, until next week, have a great rest of your week, and feel free, if you like this video, hit the subscribe and make sure to ring the notification bell. You'll be notified every time we go live, which right now is every Monday from 10 to 11 a.m. We will be diving into more techniques as far as mixing goes next week. And yeah, thanks for checking us out, and we will see you guys next time.